Hello and welcome to what'll probably be one of the last videos I'm going to do in this style. I probably will cover items at some point, but items are a whole different beast compared to what we've been doing. But this is going to be a little video about the party comps. I know a lot of people have asked me for this one. I can size this up a little bit for you. We're only going to be covering above 0.001. These are compiled by my Discord. Shout out to, I think this was by Tanya. Not 100% sure, but I've seen a few of these floating around and I've played a decent number of these. So we'll take some time and I'll talk about each of the party comps. I'm gonna, similar to the curses video, I'm just gonna like hide this and flip back over here to scroll through the ledger from time to time. But yeah, let's get to it. Let me re-enable the window here. So we'll start with basic and then I'll just go from top to bottom. You know, I guess the goal of this video is to talk about these parties, what their strengths and weaknesses are. I think the big thing to look at is curses that they will excel against and curses that will cause more trouble, and also very specifically things that I think these parties are particularly weak to. So basic doesn't really have any big strength or big weakness. Generally speaking, all of the characters here, let me switch back. So in the context of basic, all of the characters that were really bad have become a little bit better in this update. So like Ludus is the same, but I think that Ludus is probably on the lower end in my mind in terms of like worst case characters. The only really bad character I think is probably Prince. For basic, this is for basic because I'm gonna put a little asterisk here. I don't want to repeat myself 100 or 1,000 times in this video. This character, Tainted, is the reason that you can't random tier 3 greens. This character is Doom. So, I will not speak too much on this. This is the one, though, that you have to be like, if you're playing a party with greens, which, you know, if you're playing a party with greens, you're probably just having fun anyway. But regardless, Tainted is the death. I know, and people are going to go, oh, well, what about Tainted throughout this video when I'm speaking? I will give you this disclaimer now. This is the never ever, no matter what, do everything in your power to avoid it. But probably the worst character right now in most party comps is, I think it's Ace, because tier 3 Gambler is really gross, and I think for the same reason Prince is very bad, but Prince isn't tier 3 Gambler because if you're playing towards Unite, you actually need an X, so any of his sides become useful, which is why Prince is actually a little better than Ace in my mind, I guess, but this is the death character, I think. This is the one that you're trying to avoid because, and he's not even that bad. I've won runs with him. Your fate is in your own hands because these are out of your control. But with the change to draw, it's actually not crazy if you have ways to fix his sides, like a Dragonhide Gloves or a Pocket Mirror. I could see him not being even that bad. Just want to go through some of the big things you have to look out for. As far as curses go, I mean, it's hard to talk about basic because, like, what the fuck do you even say about basic, man? It's probably the best party because it has the all around. There's no real bad hit for it. There's nothing that's like, oh, well, this is too bad, I can't win. And I don't know. It's basic. It's boring. I'm gonna move on. I don't have any big insight about this one. Let me bring the list back up. So we'll go left to right, top to bottom here. So we'll go to greens. So let me start with this. I want to say, now that we're out of the basic, in my opinion, there are only really two parties that I would ever click if I was trying super hard. And when I was trying super hard, there were only two parties that I really clicked for my win streak, and those were basic and force. So if you want to approach this game from the perspective of win streaking, just play basic or force. That is my big tip. I've heard some people say, ooh, well, I have good runs with defensive, or ooh, I have good runs with RNG. One time it gave me yellow, yellow, orange, gray, gray. No one's actually said that to me. That would just be pretty funny as an argument, though. And that's fine. Play the game however you like. I think Flex is the most fun party in the game. It's a nice mix of wacky randomness and strength. But all of that aside, I'll give you my thoughts outside of just playing the only two parties that are worth playing. The greens aren't as bad as they seem. I've been coming around lately on the greens. So obviously the whole point of the green party is you get 2 greens, gray, orange, yellow. Greens as a class are very interesting because they flex through a bunch of different roles. So like, for example, Mimic is whatever the rest of your team is. Sphere is this like strong, supportive, defensive character where he helps the rest of your team hit and he usually stuns an enemy. And he has the option to turn his sides into damage, which is solid. Not you. Presence is this like full support, never dies to stack damage sort of guy, with all of these different side replacer or side enhancers. But the problem with Presence is that at best, he's usually doubling one of your other dice in effectiveness, which is about the same as just having another dice. But what you're looking out for in green, or in greens in particular, is filling the gaps in your run. So with, it's orange, yellow, gray. With that, you have this like, you have a pretty good damage core with orange, yellow. So you need to be looking at your greens and thinking to yourself, like, I've picked a lot of spine lately. This guy, he's actually super good in greens because he brings this heal 4, which is really, really good. Like, actually unironically good. If you compare him to something like Priestess, in a sense, or like Medic, for example, they do a very similar thing of just picking a few characters and keeping them alive. But on the way there, Spine pings off like 3 or 4 HP from the enemies, which is, you know, if you compare him to a red, he's pretty good, all things considered, because that's about what you're expecting out of like a druid, for example. Very comparable output, shockingly. So I've actually come around a lot on Spine as I've come to the realization, but I don't want to just make this video like a recreation of the hero tier list in a different flavor. I think that the big point about this greens party, you can see my cursor, there it is. The big point about this greens party is you need to use the greens for what they're for, which is flexing into whatever your party is missing. They don't have any sort of like defined role. Like, orange is damage, yellow is damage, gray is shield, red is heal and mana, blue is mana and spells for damage, right? Like, red is defensive mana, blue is aggressive mana is another way to put it. The greens don't fall into any one category, and instead they're just this like collection of wacky weirdos. So you want to use the greens like that, and you want to pick the greens that are like, hey, I need healing, I'll take Spine or Presence or who else is in this that can do something? Honestly, if it's a good time for it, you could pick Coffin, and you could just go like, oh yeah, well, Coffin will cover me here. This mostly for the tier 2, like the mid game. The end game greens are just like super weird because they move away from this supportive role into, here, let me bring this up. They either become super goofy gimmicks or they become gambler, like super goofy gambler. So or their robot, who is just like, here's keyword soup, or their vessel, who is a blessing and hope you have some side replacers. So you kind of transition through the game with the greens from early game power, like, because they're actually pretty strong early game. The early greens are solid at getting you through there, to this mid game flex role between like high damage survivability, healing, enchanting, basically whatever the fuck your party's doing, and item holder, into this like end game of either pick one of the ones that lets you roll a bunch of dice or pick one of the ones that just wants side replacers. So I don't know. I think that this party is not as bad as it seems. You just have to make sure that you have your expectations correct for the greens. Okay, Force is Force, and Force is good. Probably the best. It's like second best, I think. The thing about Force is that, oh sorry, greens for curses, it's like, it's hard to say because the greens are so weird. I don't think there's a particular curse or blessing you want to look out for. The big thing though, if you have these, is you have a little more expected power in the early game, as long as you're willing to do things like sacrifice Tinder or throw your reflection away. But someone pointed this out in the tier list video, and I think you're correct for this. If you start the game with Spade, you basically can't lose until Combat 8 because Spade is so much effective value of reviving your characters. So Once you get comfortable with losing characters and picking them back up with things like Spade, you realize that your early game is really solid with greens. So the problem with greens is that they have a bad late. But actually they are pretty strong at the start of the run. So you can be more aggressive with early game curses, I think, but be careful. Force is, anyway, now is Force, and Force is very good. I will talk about it just a little bit, but I'm sure you all know that Force is good. The big thing about Force, I want to make sure I get this out there as fast as possible. You have to be really careful about one of the quote-unquote free curses, which is item poison, because Force doesn't have access to healing, and if you take item poison, you are basically putting all of your characters that have items on a clock. You're saying, in a certain amount of turns, this character is dead. Streamer, what about Venom? Yeah, okay. I mean, sure. There's some healing in the class setup, but it's not prevalent. That's what I'm trying to drive home here. Like, you can pick things that have healing, like you can value Paladin a little higher in that circumstance, and it's fine. But just be aware of it, because I found myself in a run where I went, oh shit, I have no way to counteract this poison. Whoops. I don't think item poison is bad for this team, by the way. I still think it's very good. You just have to be super choosy with what items you put on. But other than that, I mean, Force is just good because this is a lot of upfront raw damage, and the yellows are all very good. So you just go like Scrapper with 2 grays, and you can force them to give you any character you want. So Scrapper plus some sort of shield item, like Ironblood Pendant, for example, will just be a game winner on his own. But, you know, other than just do it, you don't hyper focus on the steal plan. Don't like force yourself into bad picks over it. It's not the end of the world if you don't play it. It's just one of the easy ways, because Force's biggest problem is that eventually, if you miss on your items, bludgeoning the final boss gets hard. Like, if your game plan is to just hit raw damage into, hey, you know, someone pointed this out in the curses video yesterday, but I'm realizing this as we go on. In the past, this game was, and by in the past I mean in 2.0, this game was, what's my plan for Hexia? How am I going to go long? What's my plan for Dragon? How am I going to beat past his 40 damage? And what's my plan for Hand? How am I going to abuse his handicap to kill him? This game is now just, oh my god, what am I going to do to the Hand? I'm finding this more and more. Every single one of these parties is probably going to get judged in my mind by how good are they at fighting the Hand, because I think every other boss by comparison is just weak. If you kill the Hand, you probably beat every single other boss. So, you know, and by every other boss, I mean every other final boss. You could die to Troll King, I guess, or like Tarantus or whatever, but I just want to drive that home because it's going to be a big theme throughout my content for a while, is oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, the Hand. So just be aware. I think Force actually does struggle a little bit into the Hand. You need to be sure that you have some sort of plan for it. And typically I think the easiest plan is probably Valkyrie, because Valkyrie can just give your characters another go. You can have 3 characters die and she can pick them all back up, but I'm not 100% sold on that yet. I'm still kind of figuring it out. Just be aware that hitting like veteran 5s and bash 7s and things like that is still going to take a long time to kill the Hand, and you can definitely get mobbed. Magical, I would imagine this is my least played party. Red, blue, green, orange. I think this party is terrible. Would you like to know why? Of course you would. You're here for my opinions. Magical has one really big, massive problem with it. Like, a world-ending problem that I can't believe has not been addressed. And his name is Student. To a lesser extent, it's Initiate. But if you start the game and you are sitting here on fucking Magical going, yep, I'm making a bunch of mana and supporting, and my green is also here supporting, and my orange is just doing ping damage, but I'm doing all of this mana generation for Student? That's fucking awful. Like, it's so depressing to just sit there and go, yeah, I made 5 mana, Student, what are you doing? Oh, it's Slice plus Burst. Oh man. And the problem with that is that, like, you could think to yourself, oh well, I'll just replace Student early. You don't have control over that. Like, if your first blue, because let me count it up for you. How many blues are good as your tier 2 transition, assuming you started with a bad one like Student, or also Prodigy's pretty bad because Prodigy's spell is single cast. Like, you're looking for a character who has a good spell, something that you can really go for, or just Cultist because you can brute force so much mana and the pain gets healed up. So, like, to me, the best starters are probably Meddler, Mage, Cultist for this party, but if you are stuck on something like Student or Initiate, what's your transition? Well, you can play not this, not this. It's like, it's very hard to say, oh, well, you could play Evoker because, like, this guy's a piece of shit. Like, he just misses all the time and does nothing, and you're just sitting there rolling X's going, haha, Evoker, it's fine. You're honestly just coping. So you really, I don't think I would say, like, this is like, it's a begrudging settle. You go like, oh, well, my reds are really rocking me a bunch of mana. I need to get rid of this Student. I guess I click on Evoker. But like, Seer, in theory, it's okay because you can foretell and live for a really long time. And I think it's like, it's the bottom end of fine. But what I have found very often is that in this party, you are just spending all of your mana just trying to stay above water, and I never really had time to get foretelling. But it may have just been a bad couple of fights. Glacia is like, again, it's fine, but if you lock in something like Glacia, you are then saying, like, my whole mid game is going to revolve around this character. Pray it's a good one. How many of these oranges can solo carry? I mean, like, Juggler, sure. Spellblade is okay, but item dependent. Rogue can do it. Not really Ranger. Definitely not Trapper. Ooh, God, not Dabbler. So you really just hope, at that point you're just like, well, I need to play one of these two. Or else my party comp is just fucked. And Fiend, you know, he's not a carry, but he's pretty good. But it's the same thing of like, well, he's doing something, but I really need to find, like, if you're keeping Fiend and you're into fight 12 and you're into fight 16, God forbid, and you're sitting there going like, yeah, Fiend, do 1 to all. Now I only have to do 19 damage to Troll King. That's cool. Who's doing 19 damage to that boss before he just fucking steps on you? Good question, isn't it? I guess it's gonna have to be your green. Hope you rolled someone good for that. Like, greens in parties where you need damage, I think is where you really will find a lot of trouble. We can move on to talking about the green position in this party. You're gonna be sitting there and you're gonna be looking at these tier 3 greens or tier 2 greens, and you're gonna go, well, one of these guys needs to do damage for me. Who is it? And the problem with it being Mimic, and this is true, this is a big problem with it being Mimic. There's a fight out there that is Thorn, 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 Sniper, Sniper, Sniper in the mid to late game, and if all you do is make mana, you're gonna look real fucking stupid watching your orange try to clear all those thorns while you desperately try to stay alive from triple sniper shooting you. That's like the big problem with Mimic, because sorry, my alarm just went off. What the hell? What the hell did I set an alarm for? That scared the shit out of me. Well, anyway, in these like defensive based, magical based parties, you're gonna find this problem a lot of, if I run into a thorn, I'm just fucked, right? Or like if I run into a fight of 2 or 3 demons at the before the final boss, or God forbid Hexia and she makes demons, like, oh my god, you know? You can hope for your orange, but if there's 2 demons there, you are at best killing 1 if you have a perfect setup. So that's the real trouble. I'm gonna move on from this now. Just, I hope that covers it all. I hope that gives you a good understanding at least. Okay, deep breath. I can carry on. Flex is my favorite party. I think I said this. It's like, to me, it's the most fun, but I don't even think it's that bad, actually, because you have consistent damage from yellow, you have this flexible position from green, and your blue and red are known factors of, I'll have at least some healing and some mana gain through the early to mid game. The question mark can be anything. I think there isn't really a bad hit here. That's the nice thing. There's not really a bad flex. Maybe second green, but even second green isn't that bad. So, I mean, second green, and you're basically playing greens, but it's like a magical greens. So I don't really mind that one either. The big difference, I think, because you're actually only 1 step away from playing magical with flex, but the big difference is that instead of this orange character, you have this yellow character, and this yellow character has a much better chance of being someone who is just going to punch through all of the enemies. Oranges are like this nice average sort of like smooth power curve, Yellows are like, I hit Barbarian and I hit the right item for Barbarian, I just killed Hexia from full HP, you know? So that's the big difference maker, in my opinion. But just assume that there's a little asterisk here too. If I'm talking about a party with a question mark in it, you shouldn't play this for a streak because it's out of your control. It's way too random. But if you really, really want to, I think Flex is okay for streaking. I'm not going to talk about any specifics that I'm worried about for this party because I don't think there are any that you can know. Just use your eyes to see your early game and make sure you're not playing like lazy initiate mystic or something like that. Because if you're rolling some horror like spade lazy initiate mystic student, that's a party that I would probably just auto reroll. But mostly I've been just talking about the early to mid game. That's because the late game is, in my opinion anyway, a lot more item dependent than it is character dependent. And talking about all of the character and item combinations is really hard. So most of the early game is, to me, character dependent, and so I worry more about it there. And then once you get into like tier 6, tier 7, tier 8 items, it's how do I use characters that use these items well to do something broken to kill the bosses. I think that's the best way to put it. Okay, I'm done with Flex. I'm going to talk about Mountain now. This is, to me, the worst party in the game, and I know that there are Mountain defenders out there, but this party really has nothing good going for it. There's so many dead starts where you just open the game with Student Prodigy and like 2 grays like Squire plus it's Squire plus, who the fuck is it? It's Squire plus Buckle is the one. Like there are so many doomed starting parties here for Mountain where you're just sitting there at the start of the run going, wow, I can hit no damage. Student Prodigy is the big one, but there's a lot of these that are really, really bad. And again, it's magical but worse because you don't have access to an orange, so you really need your green to bring damage to break special HP versus things like demons or, God forbid, thorns. Mountain can really, really get farmed early too by bad thorn fights. The big thing you need to notice about this party if you are fighting bad thorn fights is that your best out is to just sacrifice a character, pray they hit some sort of way to do damage, and send them into a thorn, and then hope that you have enough HP to make the other one run. Otherwise, you just get chewed apart. But I don't know. I know that there are people out there who really like this party. I've heard them speak to me over and over. And the endgame combinations aren't terrible, but this party I'm pretty sure can get offered Prince, which is a fucking joke, and just shouldn't be allowed, because you're never casting Unite with this team. And that's all Prince is good for. But it really feels like the worst of both worlds, because mana gain is hard to make useful. It's really, really hard to turn this mana into something that is like for sure going to win me fights. Because at best, it's like a bunch of ways to do 2 damage. And shielding is fine, but doesn't really win you the fight. You have to be sure that when you pick your blues, you pick someone who will definitely carry you. And here's the last big thing about Mountain. This party is baiting you because this doesn't have good mana gain. If you're playing 2 blues and one of them is like a mana hungry guy like Evoker, for example, and he's just sitting there rolling X's, you're making no fucking mana. Your other blue is just going to be generating mana for 1, and then you're just going to funnel it to Evoker to do 4 damage. Like, it ends up being really bad, but I don't know. I think this party is just really, really gross. It also, I think, just gets farmed by Hexia super hard, and well, again, the end game is hard to say because sometimes at the end of your run, you're just going to have some crazy combo that hits like 40 mana and you're going to go, wow, that was sick, Mountain's so broken. And like, yeah, I mean, in that run it was, but mostly I think that you need to be thinking from the perspective of how am I going to survive to the end of the run? Worry about cool, crazy, broken combos once you get there. And that mostly is through items, and the item combinations are like, oh, well, it's so vast that I could not hope to cover it all in one video, or in this video, I should say. I don't even know if I could cover it all in one lifetime, because people are coming to me with new item combos all the time. They're like, hey, I did this cool thing. And I go, wow, really? That's sick. Good shit. So, you know, mostly I'm going to keep these two early to mid game choices. And the mountain early to mid game, it's very similar to the magical early to mid game, but you get 2 blues. Just pray you get like early Sparky, and you're allowed to get, and you don't fight thorns, and you'll be okay. Defensive. Defensive. Just takes me a second to really correlate my thoughts here. I think that there's no real, like, non-arrogant way to say this. People say, like, people talk to me about my playstyle, and inevitably we were going to have to talk about this at some point. I play fast, aggressive, etc., etc. And people are like, oh, well, I prefer to play slower, and so I think it's just better to play slower. I don't think that playstyles exist in this game. I think that from a perspective of streaking and trying to play the game as best as you can, you are going to want to do what's best in the given circumstance with the tools that you've been offered. And figuring out what that is the hard part of this game. I think that more often than not, the best thing to do is, so at a very basic level, your goal is to mitigate the curse that you're fighting as best as you can. Some curses are unmitigatable, and I mean that truly. Like, stone monsters, you can't mitigate that. There's no way for you to stop the enemies from getting stone HP. All you can do, the best way you can mitigate it is by just passing on turn 1, or just like neutralizing their turn 1, right? Conversely, the best way to mitigate something like item poison is to not put items on that are not useful. The best way to mitigate something like small bonus is to kill small enemies quickly. I think that when you get right down to it, a majority of curses, the best way to mitigate them is to kill the enemies. So when you are talking about playstyles, if you're trying to just sit there and stall out forever, eventually you have to do damage to the enemies. No matter what you do, at some point throughout your run, you're going to have to do damage to the enemies. Someone is inevitably going to say, oh, well, you could just vitality heal up to enough max HP to make them run. Go ahead. Try that strategy out. Try to win like 10 runs in a row where all you do is like pacifism. You're going to find probably pretty quickly it doesn't pan out. And this is an extreme example. Don't get it twisted. But all of this is to get around to saying that defensive's biggest problem is that sometimes defending isn't good. Like, if you're fighting into Bell or Fanatics, you're going to want to just defend because they're going to die off naturally. If you're fighting into something like, I don't know, what is a good example of a fight that you cannot play slow into? Let me pull up the party, or let me pull it up here. I'll hide this so you can look with me. Come with me on a journey. We're going to find this out together because I know that there's a good answer to this. Oh yeah, it's him. It's him. It's always him. Welcome back. It's always him. It's him. It's always him. You know, if you like to play slow, it's fine and dandy, but eventually you can't slow play this side. You can't slow play this shit, you know? That's the big point that I want to make sure you understand. There are fights in the game that you can play slowly into, but and you are incentivized to play slowly into some of them, but like, you can't slow play into this guy. You can't slow play into this guy. So it's better to have the option to do either, right? And defensive doesn't really have the option to kill things fast. If your yellow is good, you can kind of fight it. Sorry, my fault. Here. If your yellow is good, you can kind of like punch through the enemies quickly, but you're gonna find yourself having a lot of trouble. And what you can do on turn 1 is you can have like empty max HP to heal, or you can have vitality sides, or you can make mana. But comparatively speaking, let me, you know what the best way to put it is? Out of your tier 3s, you can expect somewhere in the range of like 4 to 6 pips of value out of them. If your tier 3 red is getting 4 pips of value, but 2 of those pips are healing on turn 1 that is wasted, you're basically getting 2 damage or like a 2 flexibility mana into whatever you want to spend it on out of your tier 3 on turn 1. That's, I don't think you need me to tell you this, very clearly worse than something like a yellow character just hitting a 6. Which is the trouble. And when you fall behind against the enemies, you stay behind forever, and you're just kind of like trying to claw back. So there's a lot of fights in the game that I think defensive gets farmed by, and that is the main reason that I think you should not click on this party. But it is fun when everything goes right and you get to play like Prophet into Inevitable and just sit there and farm him. I don't think that that's bad. I think it's a good time and I think it's enjoyable. I think it's also very inconsistent. Oh, something else that I want to mention, I actually forgot to mention this. Most of this tier list is for the perspective of hard, and some people bring in like, oh, this is cool on Generate, and it's fine. Feel free. Chime in with your other game modes. I'm happy to hear it. Like, I would be interested to hear how these parties perform on Unfair, for example. Someone did tell me that the Bortra run that made it all the way to the end, like to 999, was a mountain party. So I don't know what mountain does in Bortra that really goes off, but yeah, there you go. Now, originally this is where I was going to stop, but since this little thing has a few more parties we can talk about real quick, I don't mind. RNG is RNG. I mean, you know, there's no analysis for RNG. It's just fun. I think it's fun to click on this party and see what they give you because the rerolls are usually not that big of a deal. But look, man, I played green, 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 gray, gray, and I played green, gray, green, gray, gray, I'm pretty sure. So be ready for horrors beyond your comprehension to come out of this party comp. But it's fun. It's fun to face the horrors. I haven't really played Strays all that much, and I think it's mostly because I click on this party comp, gray, orange, orange. It gives me 2 randoms, and I go, this looks unplayable. And a lot of times, I think it is. Very recently, I think this video will actually be going up after the video that I'm about to talk about. I played a run of Choose Party 5 Orange. Oranges aren't that good. They're like this weird in-between of not really all that tanky and survivable, but also not that good at doing big damage. They have like weird hits of damage that usually averages out to around 4, but it's very hard to make an orange solo your run without a really good item set. So having 2 oranges isn't really something that I'm excited about. And as a result, I think Strays is just not all that good. But it is fun to click the question marks and see what horrors they give you. But I have been finding that I think in this update particularly, oranges are a lot less of what I'm excited about carrying my run. It's like yellows and good blues, but not these good blues. It's really just yellows. Sysab is just reverse basic. I think this party comp is actually very, very slightly better than regular basic. It's super minor, but into Hexia, having your orange on bottom is very slightly better because you can dodge Pain Mirror without having to waste your mana gain. Like, because Weaver can dodge Pain Mirror, but on the turns where he's dodging Pain Mirror, or sorry, it's Mana Burn, technically. Weaver can dodge Mana Burn, but you can't also make the mana. So I think Sysab is pretty, very, very slightly better than basic. And then Rush is cool. I haven't actually played this comp too much. It doesn't show up for me all that often, but double blues, but they give you an orange and a yellow to fix your fucked up early game is cool. Just be sure that this isn't like, again, lazy scoundrel initiate prodigy squire, because if you play that party comp at the start of the run, you can be really doomed. Here's your big final closing thought. If you're playing a comp that has a big focus on the early game yellow, like defensive or basic to a less extent, rush though, things like that where you have like loaded up on other supporting characters and a yellow, if your starting yellow is lazy, reroll. That's my final thought. Thank you for watching. I hope that this was helpful. I kind of feel like this wasn't all that helpful, but I don't know. People ask me for party comp rundowns and I don't feel like I have a whole lot to say. It's hard to really organize my thoughts because I kind of just approach this game from the perspective of trying things and figuring out what works and what doesn't. So, I don't know. Let me know. I'll maybe try to revisit this in the future. Probably not, though. This didn't... I don't feel like I really offered you any... This feels more like I'm fighting an inner battle than it does feel like I'm actually offering helpful information. But maybe you found it helpful. I don't know. I think at the end of the day, the best thing you can do if you want to get better and you want to do this is to try these parties out for yourself. But the big thing is you have to be sure that you're getting good data from these. So if you play a run of like defensive, or no, if you play a run of mountain, but your starting party is like meddler cultist and you just stomp the early game with no trouble, it's not really indicative, right? You gotta play it and get some bad cases and go, okay, now in the bad cases, how likely do I think I was to die if I got a slightly different outcome, right? That's what you gotta think about to me. But I'm gonna stop yapping. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to leave me a like, subscribe if you want to see more, and I will see you in the next one. Have a good one.